are signing in as we speak. They can sign in as the session starts. Over to you.
Absolutely, Dina. Thank you very much. I can see that the numbers are increasing as we speak. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen, your excellencies, panelists, speakers, and attendees and participants. It's such a pleasure for me to be with you today, moderating this wonderful all women inspirational session. This is a moment that really we need to document, because this is my first panel of all women, women of international diplomacy and international cooperation. And it's such a pleasure to see inspirational women changing the world as we know it. This is the first session, or the first dialogue of a series of dialogues that will be taking place in the next few weeks, celebrating and marking the UN 75th anniversary and UN75 dialogues of cooperation, of partnership. The power of partnership. The power of partnership is miraculous, is magical, as we say. The Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 17, is partnership. And we believe that without Goal 17, we could never even imagine to make a change for all the 16 goals that come before the 17th. In fact, it should be number one, because without cooperation and without partnership and international unity, the world will never advance, and sustainable development goals will not be, the agenda will not be pushed further. So this is a wonderful picture of women in leadership, but also countries coming together for sustainable development, coming together for tolerance, for human rights, for gender equality, for zero hunger, and so on. It's a pleasure. And it's just the first session marking the UN Day, which was yesterday, in fact. So without further ado, I would like to also explain why MBC Hope, the corporate sustainability arm of MBC Group, is part of this moment. We believe that media has a huge role to play when it comes to changing mindsets, when it comes to highlighting the impact and the power of impact for all the United Nations organizations working really hard, tirelessly around the world to make a difference for women, to make a difference for education, for our youth. We live in a region with the highest unemployment rates in the world. Our region is suffering with youth graduating and not finding appropriate jobs and opportunities for them. So the collaboration is important to give hope and future for the youth, but also to really highlight the efforts that each one of you and each country and each entity creates on ground for everyone. Let me start by introducing our wonderful panelists. Just a brief introduction with each and every panelist. Her Excellency Lana Nusaybe, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the United Arab Emirates to the United Nations. Her Excellency Ahoud Al-Zaabi, Director of the United Nations Department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Her Excellency Dr. Dina Assaf, UN Resident Coordinator for the UAE and Deputy Commissioner General of the UN at Expo 2020. Her Excellency Francesca Mendes Escobar, Ambassador of Mexico to the UAE and Iraq. Her Excellency Elizabeth Cardoso, Ambassador of Grand Duchy of Luxembourg to the UAE. Her Excellency Maria Calleja, Ambassador of the Republic of Malta to the UAE, and Her Excellency Jocelyn Quintana, Ambassador of the Philippines to the UAE. It's wonderful to have you with us, and thank you so much for your time. I would like to leave introductory remarks now to Dr. Dina Assaf, UN Resident Coordinator. Dina, over to you.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Am I on mute? Wait, let me check. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Good evening, Excellencies, and good evening to all who have joined today's UN75 Dialogue. It's an exciting event to host today, as this session marks the first of a series of dialogues that the United Nations in the UAE will be conducting in the partnership with Embassy Hope. I would like to thank Ms. Mariam Farag, Head of Corporate Sustainability at Embassy Group, for the support and collaboration. Today's UN75 Dialogue will also commemorate United Nations Day, which will be on the 24th of October. It is an especially significant milestone this year as we mark the 75th anniversary of the creation of the United Nations. Launched by the UN Secretary General earlier this year, the UN75 dialogues are part of a wider global conversation the UN is having with all segments of society to not only listen to your views and ideas, but also to remind people why multilateral cooperation is important in ensuring that global and local decision-making, as well as governance, is more inclusive and accountable. And we collectively determine the future we want and the UN we need. COVID-19 was an unexpected disruption to our lives and our daily interactions. And thankfully, technology and creativity have enabled us to carry out the UN75 consultations. And if anything, the pandemic only highlighted the need to work together to overcome the great challenges humanity faces. It reminded us we all have a role to play for a safer, more prosperous future. The UAE government is also commemorating UN75 with a virtual event under the auspices of the World Government Summit entitled 75 Minutes for Global Collaboration. It will be held next Monday, the 26th of October, and I encourage you to look it up, with the participation of the UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres. And additionally, as a gesture to showcase the strong support and partnership with the United Nations, the SDGs, and multilateralism, the UAE government will be lighting up the ADNOC headquarters building in Abu Dhabi, as well as the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, with the UN logo commemorating UN75 on the evening of Saturday, 24th October. And I invite you all to visit these landmarks on that day. In the words of the UN Secretary General in his statement for UN Day, the United Nations not only stands with you, the United Nations belongs to you and is you, we the peoples. Together, let us uphold the enduring values of the United Nations Charter. Let us build on our advances across the decades. Let us realize our shared vision of a better world for all. I'm looking forward to what will surely be a stimulating and inspiring discussion today, and also hope you can join us for the other UN75 dialogues in the coming weeks. I extend my thanks in advance to our esteemed panel, who will be sharing with us their rich experience and views on the importance of multilateralism, international diplomacy, and global cooperation and collaboration. Thank you very much. Over to you, Mariam.
Dina, that was very inspirational. As a UN veteran myself, I really value these words by His Excellency, the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. Just before we go to our next speaker, just housekeeping rules, if you want. I would ask you to kindly keep your mics on mute unless called for or called upon to speak. And Q&As for our participants will be in the end, and we will be able to pick a few questions for our esteemed panelists to answer. Now over to Her Excellency Lana Nusaybe, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the United Arab Emirates to the United Nations. Over to you.
Thank you, Excellencies, colleagues. Good morning from New York, and I'm really honored to join you. And thank you to you, Dina, for convening this accomplished group today. I'd also really like to thank Embassy Hope for its support. It's wonderful to be back home, even if virtually, and to speak about a topic that's really critical for the UN's 75th anniversary, and especially for the UAE. It's also much appreciated to have this opportunity for a more informal exchange with the ambassadors who are so central to the UAE's foreign policy and our partnerships globally. I'd like to share an anecdote about women in diplomacy and multilateralism to kick us off. Just a month ago in New York, where I serve, as you all know, we had, of course, the UN General Assembly, the moment when 193 world leaders present their views on the past year and their visions for the future. And so it was quite disheartening that the first woman to speak was number 53, the president of Slovakia. And that was on the second day of the General Assembly. So I don't know if you could get a better example of a manual than that. I don't think this is controversial to say anymore, but that number 53 doesn't feel right for the modern world. We see the same uncomfortable imbalance elsewhere. At the UN, women are 25% of the ambassadors, even though we always tout that the numbers are increasing. And they're just 25% of the world's parliamentary seats and only 21% globally of ministerial positions. Among UN staff, we're doing better, and I also commend the SG's commitment to this, but we're often far from 50% in key sectors, such as security, as well as in conflict and humanitarian settings. That's not to say that there are no great men in these positions, and we all know that men are women's allies. Many men are women's allies in this struggle for equality. But 75 years after the founding of the UN, we know that low representation of women in diplomacy speaks to systemic issues, not individuals' merits. COVID-19 is sadly reinforcing these systemic issues, with women almost twice as likely to lose their livelihoods today because of the impact of COVID-19. We also know, if we need to look at the cost value of this, we also know that inequality comes at a high cost. So many studies have been done around this. The one I like to cite, because I think it's quite indicative, is the McKinsey study, which estimates that we would lose $13 trillion of global GDP by 2030 if we stick to business as usual on gender equality. $13 trillion at the point where we're about to face a potential global recession, and we are in a recession. We're facing an economic precipice because of COVID-19. So there are some of the number facts that I think it's so important to pull out. In the security sector, lack of women, we know, as the data shows, means less stability, less peace. So when women participate in peace processes, the resulting agreements are 35% more likely to last at least 15 years rather than failing within the first few. Isn't that data enough to convince us that the case is there to push this agenda forward? Just a few brief words about where I come from, where you all are lucky enough to be right now. I'm lucky to come from a country that believed in the moral imperative of gender equality before this business case was even quantified. But the latter is, of course, not lost in our domestic or our foreign policy. So empowering women is one of the best investments any country or institution can make. And we genuinely believe that in our practice of foreign policy. And with that outlook, the UAE, as you've seen, while making it your home, started its own transformation through this prism. We've got much work ahead. We're not resting on our laurels, but we're on a compelling track, setting and achieving a 50-50 gender balance quota, for example, in the Federal National Council, our parliamentary system. And this year, becoming just one of 7 countries to have legally guaranteed equal pay for equal work in the private sector. One of 7 countries globally. Some 70% of our university graduates are women, and we have many women in visible leadership positions, including, of course, a third of our cabinet. Our domestic experience, in turn, sets our foreign policy, especially under the leadership of His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who enshrined gender equality as one of our 3 international cooperation pillars. Again, not everyone around the world has done that. In fact, very few have. So in that context, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we have in mind for our engagement at the United Nations in particular, and our hopes for what the UN's 75th anniversary can set into motion if we all subscribe to this philosophy. As you probably heard, last month, the UAE announced its candidacy for the UN Security Council for 2022 and 2023. This is a once in a generation moment for us. The last time the UAE was on the Security Council was in 1987. So as you can imagine, this is going to be a turbocharged period for us and for all our diplomats at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But one of the aspects my government is excited about is the potential, in partnership with your countries, the countries on this panel, and the UN, to really move the dial on gender equality. One of our core priorities will be on the Women, Peace and Security agenda, which is coincidentally celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. This is the concept, of course, as everyone knows, of ensuring that women are part of decision-making around peace and security issues. that they serve in armed forces, and that their specific needs are integrated into peace and security plans in order to build lasting peace. So the UAE will be looking to put in requirements and programs that achieve this vision. We want tangible outcomes. We'll be pushing in all UN peace processes for women to be core participants, up from the current statistics that women constitute just 13% of negotiators, 3% of mediators, and 4% of signatories in major peace agreements. We will be investing further in the Sheikha Fatima bint Mubarak Women, Peace and Security Initiative, a flagship partnership between the Ministry of Defense and UN Women to train female peacekeepers in the UAE. And so far, over 300 women from Asia and Africa have graduated from this program, ready to be part of the UN's famous blue helmets that inspire so much hope around the world. The UAE really hopes that this initiative will contribute to the UN's targets of greater gender equality by 2028, up from 4.2% of UN military troops today. We'll also be pursuing an accelerated response to sexual and gender-based violence by making it a standard priority of peacekeeping work and continually having the Security Council informed on field conditions. Outside, but complementary to the security realm, we're also going to continue our support for gender mainstreaming across the UN system. We're one of the largest donors to UN Women and host its Gulf office in Abu Dhabi, led by the brilliant Dr. Moza Shehi, whom many of you know. We've also enhanced our partnership with UNFPA, which provides healthcare for mothers and newborns, as well as leads the UN's efforts against sexual and gender-based violence. We made one of the largest ever humanitarian contributions to UNFPA so that they could scale up their work in some of the most challenging settings in the world. So in all these cases, we're guided by the view of women as agents of change, not victims, people whose inputs and participation result in better outcomes for communities and countries. And that's really the mindset and the underpinning metrics that we want to enshrine in the UN's future. So I believe we collectively as an international community have made great progress on the norms in the last decade, the norm setting process of the UN. 75 years ago, when the UN Charter was written, it simply assumed that the Secretary General would be a man. The Charter refers to he shall have these attributes. Today, no one would question that a woman can lead the most important multilateral institution in the world. But in order to implement these norms that we all take for granted, we need to focus on the details of implementation. For example, how many women are at the peace negotiations table? How many women have the UN consulted when designing a program? And whether promotions are linked to performance on gender equality as managers. This is the kind of work that the UAE is committed to undertake, and we're fortunate and grateful that the UN leadership, and critically the Secretary General, are as committed to this transformation as we are and leading on it. Our vision for the UAE role in the Security Council is also to be highly consultative, and we very much look forward to engaging with all of the ambassadors here today, as well as your counterparts in New York, on where we can collaborate, on how we can reflect your own views and ideas in this space. I believe that collectively we can make not just the 100th, but the 76th and 77th anniversaries of the UN, the 2 years we're going to be on the Council, moments we can be thoroughly proud of together. And I thank you again for inviting me here today.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. This has been a learning journey on the efforts of the United Arab Emirates. And as someone who has lived in this country for 14 years now, I can say that the UAE is a pioneer when it comes to gender equality and women in participation in many industries and many roles, be it political, be it development, and so on. So it is really inspiring, and you know, we're very excited to hear more about the plans in the future. We move to our next keynote speaker, Her Excellency Ahoud Al-Zaabi, Director of the United Nations Department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Maria. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the esteemed hosts of this event, I'm very pleased to be here today and would like to thank both the United Nations Office in the United Arab Emirates and NBC Hope for organizing this timely event as we honor the 25th anniversary of the Fourth World Conference on Women, Beijing Declaration on Women's Rights. This is a wonderful opportunity to celebrate the role of women in international relations and to share our views and experiences as leaders in multilateralism and international diplomacy. The late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, may God have mercy upon him, the founding father of our nation, had deep respect for women and believed in the power of investing in girls and women. He upheld the belief that any country pursuing development would need to ensure that both women and men had the skills and knowledge to lead their country into the future. This fundamental belief that women and men are equal partners in society is supported by our constitution, policies, and culture. These values, instilled by our leaders, both past and present, have transformed the UAE into the modern state it is today, with Emirati women playing a key role in the successful development of the country. The UAE is continuously ranked as a leading country in gender equality in the region by international indices, such as the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report and UNDP's Gender Equality Index. Under the remarkable leadership of Her Highness Sheikha Fatma bint Mubarak, the mother of the nation, who has long championed policies to empower girls and women, we have established key institutions to support women in their roles as leaders, mothers, and active contributors to society and economy. These include the General Women's Union, the Motherhood and Childhood Supreme Council, the Family Development Foundation, and the Gender Balance Council. In the political realm, the UAE made extraordinary strides in 2018 when His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the president of the UAE, announced that women would occupy 50% of the Federal National Council, as mentioned by Her Excellency Ambassador Lana. Such initiatives have supported women to take on leadership roles across all sectors of UAE's society. In addition to our domestic policy, UAE also championing the empowerment and protection of women in our foreign policy. This is in line with the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, where gender equality and empowerment of women and girls at the core of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. UAE has been actively advancing women's rights through our support to UN Women, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and advocating for gender equality across the UN system. The UAE also leading the international efforts to prevent sexual-based violence in conflict by providing political and financial support to prevent and investigate such crimes. We are committed to advancing peace and security in our region through the meaningful participation of women and the development of their countries. While we have much to celebrate on the global advancements of women, studies show there is still much work to be done. The global gender gap is not closed, and despite the various policies and initiatives implemented to level the playing field of our women, we are still seeing fewer women in leadership roles compared to men across many professional fields. This global phenomena transcends culture, religion, and ethnicity. Regrettably, with the COVID-19 pandemic, there are growing concerns that the gender gap will inevitably widen further, undoing the economic gains of women from the past decades. The pandemic has resulted in massive loss of jobs and livelihoods, particularly for women. This issue has been compounded by weakened social protection systems and women taking on more domestic work and childcare responsibilities. This raises the question of why women continue to fall behind their male counterparts economically, socially, and politically in the best and worst of times. We as an international community have an urgent responsibility to address the complicities of gender equality and gender equity. We need to work together to advance the social, economic, and cultural dimensions that are essential to drive the empowerment of girls and women and to close the gender gap once and for all. In closing, I have a great hope for the girls and women in the UAE. I'm incredibly inspired by the young women in my country and their determination to reach their goals. I have deep admiration for the love they have for the UAE and the results in transforming the UAE into one of the best countries in the world by 2071. I'm also highly encouraged by my female colleagues working in multilateralism and diplomacy, who are working tirelessly to build a sustainable, peaceful, and just world, a world where everyone is treated with respect and dignity and has the opportunity to reach their full potential regardless of their gender. As we celebrate 75 years of the UN, we as women and leaders must continue to advocate for the world we want. We must encourage girls and young women to be trailblazers, to not second guess themselves or accept certain outcomes because of their gender. We owe this to ourselves and to the future of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is true that the gender gap, as they say, will take us around 200 years to actually fill. So I wouldn't want to even imagine this happening. And I believe with all the efforts that the United Nations and many of the nation members are taking forward, we will be able to bridge the gap, at least, to be hopeful. And with equal pay and women participation advancing, we will be able to make it a stronger community and a stronger participation for young girls in the future, inshallah. We move to our next speaker, to our next keynote speaker, Her Excellency Francesca Mendez Escobar, Ambassador of Mexico to the UAE. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mariam. Thank you very much, all of our audience that I think they are in very parts of the world. Thank you of my colleagues and Your Excellencies. Thank you, Dana, for doing me the honor as Dean of the Ladies Ambassador Group to the UAE for giving some keynote remarks at this important celebration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, which highlights the role of women in multilateralism and in diplomacy. I would like to give 4 messages to open this forum. The first, being a female ambassador to the United Arab Emirates has been a privilege and a great opportunity. As women ambassadors, we have had many opportunities for development and very useful interaction with authorities and various actors of Emirati society. So I'm very grateful for that. Second, celebrating the 75th anniversary of the United Nations in the UAE, a country that has a very active policy on gender parity, shows how great strides can be made in gender parity in a very short time. So we have to take this into account. Third, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us at least 4 realities. First, according to studies and research by different institutions, the most affected sectors have been women and girls due to their vulnerability to poverty and violence. Second, the best results in terms of pandemic management have been in countries where there are women as prime minister or presidents. Third, there is a strong link between climate change, food security, public health, poverty, and economy that we have to take into account where we do any public planification around these important matters. 4, most than ever, the multilateralism is are really very important to tackle this pandemic and effects. So Mexico is one of the most interesting countries in the world to strengthen the multilateralism. And therefore, the government of Mexico is firmly committed to gender parity. I think we are in the 5 or 6 group of countries that we have right now a feminist foreign policy where we are working on reforms on the laws and with positive action to achieve significant change. So thank you very much for this great opportunity, Dana, and we can follow the next session of this interesting forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That was very enlightening. For sure, there are many opportunities for international cooperation, and we're seeing one of them right here, right now, in fact. Dina, I would like to give you the floor to make a transition from the keynote to our panel discussion, if you don't mind.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Mariam. And first, and again, another thank you to our esteemed panel for such inspiring opening remarks, which I think will feed into now our dialogue together over the next hour. And I just wanted to stress here as part of the introduction to this section is that not only do we have very experienced people on our panel, but they represent the diversity from across the world. So it's not just gender that makes us different. Diversity is in everything we are as human beings. We are all individuals. We all come from different backgrounds and experiences. As the United Nations, inclusivity of voice across any community, country, society is key to our solutions and finding a way forward for the SDGs and any issues that we are trying to tackle. And we stress the importance of diversity and inclusiveness, not as a tokenism to check a box, but as a way to ensure that not only are all voices heard for the sake of hearing, but to find ways to find the best solutions and to ensure ownership across any community or society. And I think we need to recognize that as women leaders in diplomacy, that the experience that we can bring forward would be lost had we not been given the opportunities that we have been given in our careers. And more women and more people with different backgrounds and different experiences need to be also given such opportunities throughout their lives. So, as part of our dialogue now, we're looking forward to hearing from the rich experiences from the panel that we have here around issues related to leadership and multilateralism, skills and capacities that they have built their careers on and have learned in their lives, as well as hearing from them on their personal experience as well in this field. So over to you, Mariam, to help us have an interesting dialogue, and thank you again to the panel.
Thank you, Dina. As one feminist and an advocate of gender parity in the US once said, inclusion is like you're getting invited to the party. Diversity is getting invited to the party, but inclusion is getting invited to the dance floor. And that's very much true. I mean, it's one thing for companies and for entities and for governments to talk about diversity, but if diversity is not followed with inclusion and real inclusion, genuine inclusion in decision-making, in board rooms, in government, in legal entities and so on, we will never really reach gender parity. We did skip the bios. If the participants and the attendees today are interested to learn more about our speakers, by all means, they will be mentioned on our social media and so on. And I will mention the social media handles in the end. But I look forward to moderating this wonderful discussion that follows about multilateral thinking. Now, my first question is to Her Excellency Ambassador Maria Kaleha. And I would like to really just touch upon, if you can share an example of your country being determined to work through the United Nations, and what was the preferred multilateral approach, if you may, just to share with us.
Thank you very much, Mariam. Thank you, Dina, and thank you everyone thank you, Dina, for inviting me, and thanks everyone. Thank you to the panel, friends, actually, rather than colleagues. And thanks to everyone listening in today, including Malta's ambassador to Women, Peace and Security, who is, I see her in the participants list. Thank you very much. Yes, I think one of the most iconic examples that I can bring to the table with regards to this question is Malta's contribution when it comes to the law of the sea. In 1967, our permanent representative to the United Nations, Arvid Pardo, who remains edged in history, delivered a rather fiery speech calling for reform in the law of the sea and calling for international regulation to ensure peace at sea and to protect ocean sources. And he actually, on behalf of Malta, coined the term common heritage of mankind, which appears in Article 136 of the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, the famed UNCLOS, which initiated then a 15-year process until 1982, which led to the drafting of the convention and the signing of the convention by no less than 168 signatories, 164 members of the United Nations, including 4 observers. And that led further to other branches, like the International Maritime Organization, the International Whaling Commission, and the International Seabed Authority to be launched as well. And not least, in our times, what we now call the BBNJ, which is the Biodiversity Beyond the National Jurisdiction working group, which now forms an integral part of the seabed discussion and the law of the sea discussion. So I think if I had to pinpoint, if I had to put my finger on something that Malta is truly proud of, Malta, which is a maritime country, I would say that this is one of the trademarks of Malta, which actually required a multilateral setting to be able to achieve such a result.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. My next question is Your Excellency, Ambassador of the Philippines to the UAE. We talked about multilateralism and international cooperation. What do you see as an effective multilateralism? And can you tell us about an experience where a multilateral approach helped to achieve an important result?
Thank you very much, Mariam. And first of all, I'd like to thank the organizer, of course, our friend Dana Asaf. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this distinguished panel. I just want to greet the United Nations happy 75th anniversary or birthday. I was in New York when it celebrated the 50th anniversary. I was a junior officer then. I had a chance to be on an attachment program. They assigned me to the 3rd committee and to the 6th committee. So the 6th committee, of course, is such a very lengthy debates that are being held there. So it was kind of a good experience also for me. But going back to the question, I think, the effective multilateralism, I think, is when countries get together and try to build a consensus. I think this is the magic of the United Nations, because when you have different countries that are having different interests and different perspectives, it's almost magical when they come together and come up with something more binding, either more legally binding or more morally binding. In the Philippine experience, we're very, very active in the issues of migration and women's issues. We have campaigned so strongly for the ratification of the United Nations International Convention on the protection of migrant workers and members of their families. This is very important for the Philippines because 10% of our population are considered migrants. And 10% of that would be 10% of 113 million. So that would be around 11 million. So we're very, very serious about the protection of our migrant workers. We are present in at least, I think, more than 90 countries, if I am not mistaken. And so it is important for us to have multilateralism as an approach. I think multilateralism is a good approach because these are we are actually caring about principles and values that are universal, and multilateralism is very effective because when a small country's voice is as powerful as a big country's voice when you talk about universal values. So human rights is very important to the Philippines, and also women's rights. We actually, the trivia here is that a woman Filipino diplomat wrote or drafted the first draft of the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Now it is now the Bill of Rights for Women. So that's common knowledge in the ministry where I belong, that it's a Filipina who actually wrote the first draft of that sort of Bill of Rights. And we also campaigned very hard for the adoption. I think it was adopted in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. And also in terms of peaceful settlement of dispute, we're also very much supportive of that. We have availed of UN mechanisms for the arbitration of our dispute on the South China Sea. So this is again something that is now in the commitment in the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. So again, we believe that multilateralism works, and it is again very important when we have common values that we can all adhere to and will be held accountable to. Thank you.
It's inspiring to know that the first draft of CEDAW was written by a woman. This is that's the power of bringing women to the dialogue, bringing women to the decision-making table. Because if we don't have that representation, it's bound to lose or miss one of the most important variables of the convention. Thank you very much for mentioning that and sharing the information with us. I have a question for Your Excellency Elizabeth Cardoso. Thank you very much for being with us today, and good afternoon. Really, it's a very important question, and I would like to also hear Her Excellency's Ahoud Al-Zaabi as well being a part of this question, but I would like to start with Your Excellency, Ambassador Elizabeth Cardoso. What are the particular leadership experiences and approaches you would like to share with our listeners today, and that have not only helped you reach the position you have today as a woman, as a leader in the political field, but also in the how you apply them to challenges of your job. Because as much as we would like to mention great results and success results here, we would also like to mention leadership tactics to challenges that women face every day in the diplomatic field, in the political field. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mariam and Dina, and hello to everybody, to the panelists and the participants. That is an interesting question indeed, and I think it's interesting that you place it in the sense of, you know, what experiences lead you to the place that you are now. Because I'm a firm believer in the fact that you are, you know, you're not just a leader. You can become a leader, and you can learn to be a leader. And also that leading doesn't mean just being a leader, doesn't mean being the boss. You can lead at any level that you are working in the sense of bringing about change. I think Ambassador Lana said that, in the sense of moving things forward. And in that sense, I see that as leadership too. For my particular career, I was lucky in two senses, I think. First of all, I come from a country, Luxembourg, for whom a multilateral participatory approach is our default. That's how we work. And also my very first experience as a young diplomat, when I started, I was in charge of multilateral development cooperation. So my job was to work with all the UN agencies, all the multilateral agencies, in a thematic way also. And so from the outset, what that taught me, and what I have used since in my work, is that the best way to move forward is to move forward in partnerships. I mean, we have our bilateral interests like other countries, but we always by default look at what are other countries doing. Is there something that we could do together that would be more efficient than if we were just trying to do it bilaterally on our own? So that's a default approach that we have, and that I have been trying to use in my work. It has also taught me to think in an overarching way, transversal way, not in a silo. What are others doing? How are the different actions of different partners reinforcing each other, or maybe competitive with each other? So I think that's very, very useful also. And one last thing I think was very useful also was that there's a sea of expertise out there. You don't need to have it all yourself. Inside the UN, for example, in other countries, there are already, best practices, experts, things you can draw on to learn, to feed your thoughts, and again, not to reinvent everything on your own, but to build on what's already there. So just to give you a few examples, of how I've used this and learned it sometimes the hard way. As a very young diplomat, actually, I was in the ministry for 3 years, and I had my first EU presidency. There was the rotation of the EU countries presiding for 6 months, and suddenly somebody who was supposed to be chairing a meeting couldn't anymore, and I was nominated. They told me, okay, you are now going to chair the EU coordinations about a subject I knew nothing about. And so I suddenly sat there and had 27 expert faces around me, mostly men, looking at me expectantly. And, I could run away or step up to the plate. So, of course, I tried my best. But I found that the way, to move forward was not to consider, I'm the presidency and I'm Luxembourg and I need to know everything and do everything, but to look around the room and, tell people I'm here for the common good, and contribute. Please help us if you have some knowledge, make alliances, etc. So, of course, I read a lot, I prepared a lot, because I think that in the end, the way to be taken seriously is to be competent. You might not be taken seriously because you're a woman, because you're young, because you come from a small country, because many reasons. But in the end, if you know your subject and you show the people that you are listening to them and that you're taking their opinion into account and trying to create a consensus or a fair decision, in the end, they will take you seriously. Usually, regardless of your gender, of your age, etc. So that's the way I tried to work, and actually that gave me power in leadership, because whenever somebody was trying to pressure me, which obviously people do when you're the chair of a meeting, and which people do even more when you're a young woman. And pressure is even higher when you come from a small country where they think, we'll just tell them what to do. I mean, my power came from having created alliances, from having a collaborative approach, and from knowing my subject, from knowing having become competent in what I was doing. So I think that's an important subject. And a second example of that was that before I came to Abu Dhabi, I was the deputy director of the Defense Department in Luxembourg. So the question I got asked most often is, how is it working in a world of men? I even had a diplomat from another country who, when I said who I was, I was working in defense, he said, what, you are defense deputy director, but you're so soft and you're so calm. But, even I, as a younger diplomat, my view of what is a leader, it was somebody, loud and outspoken and all-knowing and quick to decide and a man. But what I learned, through time is that I have my own style. I'm an introvert, so I have a different style. I prefer to lead by persuasion. I can be absolutely firm by being absolutely calm and soft, or what that person called me. But I try not to, put the fact that I'm a woman in my own way. I just act as a diplomat. If the other people have a prejudice against me because I'm a woman, well, that's their problem. And my work is to step up to the plate. So become competent in what I'm doing, so that I can, argue back when one of my, when I'm being questioned or when I'm not being taken seriously, I can reply with argumentation, with persuasion. And in this instance, in the Defense Department, I mean, for sure, the first time I sat with all those army officers in front of me, and I was supposed to talk to them about army reform, which they obviously loved. I saw in their eyes that they weren't taking me seriously. But then again, I took a collaborative approach. I talked to them. I saw what are other countries doing. What can we do together? Trying to work on a consensus. And that's something that I learned to do while I was working with the multilateral agencies and at the UN. Maybe one last example. Also more linked to women issues. When I started at the very beginning as a diplomat, for a time I was the only woman in the development department in Luxembourg. And they needed to nominate a gender desk, a person in charge of gender issues, and haha, big surprise, who did they nominate? Me, because I was a woman. And so, I did it. It was very, very interesting. But over time, I got frustrated by two things. Well, the first one was that every time I was going to a meeting, I told my colleagues, oh, I'm going to, UN Women or something like that. They would all mock me. They would all have, silly jokes because I was going to my women's meetings, etc. And I got so fed up by that I said, I'm going to organize a training for them. This is about development cooperation. This is about the role of women in development cooperation, about, there's science about this, there are data, there are, facts that we can learn about. And so, instead of just sitting there and whining, I decided to do something, to change their minds. So I organized a training for them. And most of them came out, wide-eyed saying, oh, that is gender mainstreaming. That is how, why this is important. So I tried to move things forward in that way. But the second reason I was frustrated, and that's a subject that I think is important and it's dear to me, is that although those UN meetings, EU meetings, OECD meetings, they were all very interesting and useful, but all the countries did the same as my countries. They nominated women to go there. And we ended up being women in rooms full of women, talking about how important it is to include women. We were all already convinced, you know, and I thought we need to convince the ones who are not convinced, you know. And I thought, where are the voices of men? So where are the voices of men, you know? I want to hear men tell us how they want to promote the future of their daughters, how they are educating their sons to be, gender sensitive, because gender is not like a niche special interest of women. It's, you know, the interest of everybody. It's gender balance. It's not just women promotion only. And so what I did is that when I left that department, I really insisted that the next gender desk should be a man, should be one of the male. Well, I really insisted. And in the end, they did nominate somebody. And for a time, Luxembourg was the only country who actually sent a man to those meetings. And so, yeah, I think that's an important message. And all those things that I learned throughout the years, I continue to try to apply today in my job as an ambassador, as, you know, the leader of our team at the embassy. Try to have a collaborative approach. Think, who can we partner with to do, you know, this or this project? How can we share knowledge, take knowledge from outside, give to the outside knowledge that we have, and again, lead by persuasion. So I was a bit long, sorry, but I hope this was helpful.
Very insightful, in fact. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I mean, just a few takeaways for our listeners. One of the first thing is that knowledge is power. And Your Excellency, you have mentioned that knowing your subject, knowing your expertise, knowing your job, knowing the knowledge to deserve a seat at the table. We do talk about gender parity a lot, but it's only about competencies. It's not about bridging the gap, and it's not about ticking the box. It's about giving a chance to deserved women, to deserved young girls who actually have the skills and the competencies to join a certain field or to be given a certain role. But also I heard listening, which is very important. I heard not working in silos, which is this whole dialogue is all about not working in silos, coming together for the better good of humanity. Leadership is not easy, and especially if you are the first UAE ambassador to the United Nations in New York. Your Excellency, Ahoud Al-Zaibi, you were one of the first UAE representatives to be appointed in the United Nations, as we know, the first UAE diplomat to join the staff of the United Nations headquarters in New York. That must have been challenging. That must have been quite a challenge. Can you tell us a little bit about your different leadership skills? Because we have leadership styles. Everyone is different. As Her Excellency Elizabeth mentioned, that people are different. He mentioned that you're soft. I would not care for that. I would say that you have a certain persona. You like collaboration and you are calm. So soft really is not the right term. Your Excellency Ahoud, can you share a few of the challenges that you faced and how did you maneuver around them?
Well, thank you, Mariam. Actually, I was honored to be the first diplomat to serve as at the office of the President of the General Assembly. I would say that a career in international diplomacy is very fulfilling, interesting, and an exciting career. It involves relationships, building and working with others to make positive differences in the world. Multilateralism by nature involves collective leadership. And collective leadership calls for having necessary diplomatic skills to reach your goals. One has to be firm on their position, but at the same time, one must be prepared to compromise when possible. Reaching an agreement on how to solve world problems with other nations is not an easy fit, particularly if there are differences in values or approaches. From my personal experience, I can say that most things are possible. It's about finding the right moment to bring about change. When working in a multilateral environment, such as at the UN, to reach one's goals, it's important to first understand and respect the history of the issue or topic. One must also have determination, patience, and strong relationships, let's say, in place. It's also important to demonstrate grace and goodwill. When you demonstrate these attributes, then people believe in you as a leader. They will respect you and want to work with you to find solutions.
Very, very true. Goodwill is very important. Her Excellency, Ambassador Cardoso did mention also allying. Having allies, this is very important. Teamwork is very important. Making sure that people do not feel threatened. You're not here to threaten anyone. You're not here to take anyone's position or role. You're here to actually collaborate, to reach a better result and to create better impact. And this is the power of Goal 17, which is partnership. This is what we're here doing today. I would like to move to our next segment, as we call it, or our next big topic, which is what are the skills and capabilities needed to undertake complex, multi-dimensional roles in international diplomacy? Because this is very important. It's not easy, as some of you mentioned, it's not easy to reach agreement. And we have seen it over the 75 years of the United Nations, where countries come together sometimes, but most of the time are not agreeing on a certain cause. Leading in multilateral efforts which support building productive societies and sustaining recovery from shocks, especially from COVID, require solid foundations for global cooperation and, importantly, transformative minded thinking and actions to guide diplomatic efforts. So my first question goes to Her Excellency, Ambassador Maria Kaleha. I would like to ask you, many countries support the UN initiatives to expand women's participation in multilateral processes. Does the presence or absence of women impact these processes? Over to you, Your Excellency.
I think women are essential to the process. Keeping women in the process is effectively one of the most important aspects of the process to make it more holistic, more sustainable, and more durable. In fact, it is widely believed that processes which have included women or were negotiated by women or where women were moderators and ultimately signatories have led to a more durable peace, to higher implementation and to the actual implementation of gender provisions in the process. And women look at a peace process from a different perspective, from a community, from a more civic perspective. I think in this case, nothing is more exemplary than the Good Friday Agreement in Ireland, where women, having been precluded from being part of the process because women in general, women as a group, they were not a party. What did they do? They created a coalition of cross-party women who refused to take sides. Why did they refuse to take sides? They refused to take sides because they acknowledged that the civil unrest, the troubles, as they call them, that was taking place in Northern Ireland, were directly affecting the society, the community, and ultimately their children. So, the basis of this coalition, the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition, was to achieve a culture of tolerance, mixed housing, integrated education, a culture of reconciliation, special needs for young people, inclusion of women in public life, and ultimately, their most important achievement was the creation of a civic forum. So as opposed to our male partners in processes, women look around for a more common good, the community, the grassroots. Women tackle the root causes of society. They think more of the vulnerable issues and the vulnerable elements in society. And they also think more of generational healing as well. In many ways, and we have a very recent example as well, women in many ways are change champions. I think one of the most recent examples of our time, who is a woman whom I admire very much, Jacinta Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who was just re-elected Prime Minister, who actually became a mother during her first term as Prime Minister. So why another question would be, why would motherhood preclude us from being leaders in any process? So I think Jacinda has done a great service to her own community and to the global community, especially after the deplorable, the despicable massacre that took the life of over 50 persons who were praying in a mosque in New Zealand. And she was firm and decisive and swift in implementing new gun laws in New Zealand, therefore becoming a driver for solutions in her own country. But I think one of the most important thing to keep in mind is that there are three factors that need to be taken into consideration to make sure that women continue to be included in processes, in peace processes, and in processes that are run by the United Nations, in our case, the European Union as well, where I worked extensively during my period as diplomat, working from the capital as well. I think the three factors that we need to take into consideration are, number one, accessibility. Women need to have accessibility to decision-making roles. We need to break barriers, but not just say it. We need to do it. And also the government is responsible to implement structures like my government did in implementing more widespread use of teleworking, childcare centers, breakfast clubs, maternity and paternity leave. And here I would like to commend the UAE for recently implementing mandatory paternity leave as well in the country, but also parental leave, because children have parents. They don't just have a mother or a father. They have parents. So I think setting structures, but breaking barriers, very important. Many people ask me, how come you chose the UAE for your ambassadorship? My reply is another question. Why not? I mean, we are professionals. I am not just a woman, and my colleagues are not just men. We are professionals. We were trained and we are capable to work in any country in the world. You know, there are different rules and regulations to every country, including my own, but it doesn't mean that we can be ambassadors only in a category of countries and that we cannot be ambassadors in another category. It doesn't mean that men can be ambassadors everywhere and women have a list of countries that they can choose from. No, we are professionals. We can work anywhere. And this is the same thing that I used to tell my colleagues who were junior diplomats, that who were female junior diplomats. Don't let anyone tell you what to do. Don't let anyone tell you where to go, because you can go anywhere. Girls can do anything. We should have a t-shirt with that. Visibility, yeah. The second thing should be visibility. Unfortunately, I notice a lot that women go a lot into their work and they forget to advertise it. I think we need to advertise our work more. We need to be out there. We have social media. We have so many platforms that we can use. We can use them all. And we can have people to help us. And in this day and age, we might do it. We have DIY as well. We can do it ourselves. So we have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Flickr. We can do anything. We can just take a picture and put it out there and say, listen, I did this today. And, you know, or I agree with this, or I support this. We have to be visible, because without visibility, we cannot go on databases. We need to be included in lists of people that are good as panelists, good as keynote speakers, and not just women keynote speakers, not just, like Elizabeth said, in areas where we need to talk about women. The narrative has to change. The narrative has to be about us, men and women, talking about women, or us, men and women, better still, talking about society, because we are not like stars walking in the street and we're the only visible thing in the street. You know, we are part of the society like everybody else. In fact, I think that one day I'm hoping to stop hearing the words feminism, female empowerment. We don't need these words, hopefully one day. One day we will speak of empowerment. We will speak of societal improvement. We don't need to speak about women's rights. We speak only of human rights, which is because we are human beings. We are not talking and walking, you know. We are women, men, children, senior citizens, part of society. And I think this is part of the process that we need to, this is why women need to be in the process as much as men, because they need to instill the fact that there has to be balance in the process. There has to be balance of ideas, not balance of genders, balance of ideas, balance of perspectives, how we view how we view a conflict, how we view an issue, how we view the SDGs, how they will impact us. I think this is the most important thing that we need to move towards. And the third thing is mentoring. I think we need to arrive at a stage where not only women mentor women, but the he for she movement has to take effect seriously. Men helping women, men mentoring women. And because for many years, men had it all. And for many years, men knew it all. But they need to be in the pool, including women who have been leaders for part or much of their lives. They need to be in the pool to mentor younger women to become the leaders of today and tomorrow. So I think that, yes, it is important for women to be in the process. And it is very important for women to contribute in the process at all levels, not just taking notes.
Yes, thank you, Your Excellency. You mentioned something very important, which is actually it will give me the opportunity for a transition to my next question, which is young women and the youth and mentorship and so on. And I do have a very important question, because I believe that youth are not the future, youth are the present. And this is what I always say, youth is today, youth is now, it's not later, it's not tomorrow. Some of the esteemed speakers mentioned that we have to instill, and in fact, Ambassador Cardoso said that we really need to instill in the young boys how to respect and how to give a chance for younger, their peers or their pals of girls and women as much as men. I have two boys myself, and I always try to instill those values in them. But talking about young women, and my question is a two-parter. The first part is to Your Excellency, Ambassador Lana Nusaybi, in fact. And I think if I can get your attention and Your Excellency, Ambassador Lana.
Sorry, I have something urgent coming in right now. There's an urgent meeting happening. I just need to give an instruction and
sure.
Ask me the question.
I will start with Ambassador Francesca Escobar, and then we will go back to Your Excellency. And in fact, this is one of the, it's one of those multitasking skills that we have as women, right? It's right here, right now. Your Excellency, Ambassador Escobar, I would like to ask you, what are the messages that you have for young women that would like to embark on a career in international diplomacy? And particularly, what are the watch outs? Because for me, I was a graduate of political science, master's in international relations, and I never pursued a career in diplomacy because as a young girl, I was told, oh, you're going to travel a lot, you're going to go everywhere, you're never going to get married. It's not easy to have a family. It's not. So these, believe it or not, years later are still the stereotypes that young women tend to hear and listen, and they come from different directions, from family, from friends, from peer pressure, from everything. What can you tell them today to actually perhaps inspire them to join the international diplomacy world as we know it?
Thank you very much for this question, Mariam. I think that my colleagues have already said a lot of comments and motivation for the young women in this forum. But let me add some comments. There is a poet who said that the path is made by walking. So certainly the current condition for women to achieve an international career where they can successfully integrate a family life are better now than before. So we really moved forward in the past. However, there are so much to be done, really. And we will have to continue improving conditions with all the actors in society, including men. Maria told us, this is not a discussion or a problem, women against women. So it doesnent have sense. We have to include all men in the discussion, in the planification and policy, because it's about the society. Maria also told us, it's about, and Elizabeth also. We have to work with all societies, not all about the women. It's about change in all levels of society and leaderships. So this is one of the comments. The second, the education and social awareness are essential to generate continuous changes. Let's try to generate new social partners in our immediate and everyday environment. because we don't have to wait until we have a position of leadership. In the daily life, we have a lot of opportunities to say or to do something that change every day our life and the life of the others and the life of the men, the women, the girls, the boys. So every day we have opportunities. So we have to take into account this kind of mentality. It's really very important. The other comment, we women have to accept and value our leadership in public and private institutions, and not establish competition with male leadership. The example of the Prime Minister Jacinta and all the examples that the Ambassador Elizabeth said, we are different. We can manage different kinds of leadership. So we don't have to copy the leadership of male because it's different. We can complement it very well, but we have to change the role partners of the role established of the women and men. So in every action of every day of our life. And finally, for encourage the young women to really try to enter, and especially to do that, the thing that they want to do. It could be international and diplomatic career. It could be another kind, as Elizabeth said, it could be a defense career. It could be whatever career they want. It's possible to have a balanced life. It depends of course, of the opportunities, and to accept our own leadership. I say in another forum that maybe the women cannot achieve the same, at the same time, the same position as the men, at least for now. We have to accept that for the moment. It not could be forever. And if the women want to have children, it's possible. And we have to accept this reality that we have to manage a lot of things at the same time. But the main thing is that to do whatever we want to do. It's really very important. And we have to change the path. We don't have to wait until the path change. Walking in the path, we open the opportunities and the circumstances. That's my advice. Thank you.
I think the generation now are so much forward, and they plan ahead, and they're so well connected. Social media, you know, Her Excellency Ambassador Kaleha mentioned something very important, which is building your personal brand, celebrating your successes. You need to communicate your success, and it starts with us, because we need to set an example for the young women out there and the young men out there as well. Is that it's not about boasting about your achievements. It's about actually giving somebody else the inspiration to follow your path, like you said, Your Excellency, to perhaps get inspired to do something good, to help somebody else, to say, oh, that's really an interesting career. Let me embark on it. Let me maybe even get an internship with the United Nations in the UAE and see what this whole world is all about. They will never know unless they actually try it. And we communicate a lot at MBC Hope with youth in universities, in schools, and so on, to try the field that they are about to embark upon. Because you may think that you are going to be the greatest engineer, you would go for a month of internship and then would really not find yourself, and maybe find yourself somewhere else as an actor or a filmmaker. So it's very good to try things. I would like to take one question, if you don't mind, from the audience. But first we have Her Excellency Ambassador Lana. Are you ready for our question?
Yes, I'm sorry. There was an urgent.
No worries. I hope everything is under control, Your Excellency. So we really
under control.
We really want to talk to youth. We want to talk to young women who aspire to be international diplomats, who aspire to be part of the United Nations staff, who are a little bit worried about, you know, the challenges. What are the messages that you would like to leave them with today?
Thank you. And obviously you pointed out being able to multitask is a key skill set that you need in multilateral diplomacy, but also in balancing your life as a diplomat with all the other obligations that people have in the home and elsewhere. But I would start by saying that being able to be a strong generalist is really one of the core skills that I think people let go of as they become more and more specialized. Expertise is important, but as you go up the management chain, being able to study and understand a broad range of issues and be able to take quick decisions on them is really, really one of the core skills that I think you need as a young person, as a diplomat, as someone operating in the multilateral environment. So the urgent meeting that I was dealing with was actually a meeting of an executive committee of Interpol in France, just to give you a live example, where we're discussing the holding of a General Assembly meeting to vote on hopefully our candidate for the head of that agency. But you have to be, you know, I was suddenly deep into the kind of rules of procedure of that organization at the same time as being able to hold the issue of gender empowerment in my mind and all the other things that come up in a UN setting. So you have to be agile with your education. And the best way to be agile with your education is to really study and involve yourselves in the things that you love doing, because nothing is as good in terms of your expertise as the evident passion you have for a subject. So I always tell young people who come for whatever advice I can possibly give, do what you want, do what you enjoy, because if you do the things that you enjoy, you will find a pathway through where you can put that skill set to good use. And I think that sometimes there's a little bit of an early tendency to over specialize early on. So that's, I'd say, point one. A good conversation I had with Dr. Henry Kissinger a year ago when discussing our diplomatic academy and how to best prepare our diplomats for a future in diplomacy. He said, honestly, diplomats have forgotten that diplomacy and international politics often falls around having an understanding of three things: geography, philosophy, history. And if you have a sense of geography, philosophy, and history, you really understand the various policy issues that are in front of you in a much more broad way than the very granular zero sum. I'm negotiating this. This is what my country wants in the text versus this is what your country wants in the text. So I think that's another area where we need to broaden our horizons as much as possible in our educational approach. I would also say that, and this is particularly true as you look around you and you see many people move into different positions quite quickly. I do tell my diplomats this in my mission. I'm proud that we have 7 female diplomats out of 10. The men often feel outnumbered in the mission and they start complaining that gender parity needs to go the other way as well. But I do think that it's important that people are less focused on titles and where they are in a certain point of their career. I think there's too much focus on that. I always tell them, just try to learn, try to be the person in the room who's learning and who is contributing. And trust me, you will progress in your career if you're doing those two things. If you approach everything in terms of career progression and, well, so-and-so reached this particular title by this age and I haven't reached it yet, which means I'm not doing well, I think you lose out on the immense opportunity to be passionate about what you do and to really enjoy it. Lastly, I'd say read widely. It's a habit, it's a practice as much as it's for enjoyment, but being aware of the news is not just watching your 2 or 3 favorite channels in the morning. I do a very large, extensive media scan first thing. I'm sure you do as well, as does Dina. But it's also being able to join the dots. How will what's happening here likely affect a council meeting being called on this issue there? How will that affect my priorities of the day. What will, these P5 countries be occupied with today? Joining the dots after you've done that media scan is incredibly important. I was really fascinated by some of the other points that people have put forward, and I think they're all incredibly important: leading by persuasion, not making this a women's issue, etc. One of the ones that made me smile was the issue of competence, and women always feeling that they have to prove doubly that they are competent for the job. And I want to push back a little bit on that. And just for the sake of, because I think this panel, we've all pretty much had similar perspectives, but on the competence, I remember a really long discussion with a P5 member when I was facilitating the GA revitalization process at the UN. And we were trying to advocate for language that would really encourage that the selection of the Secretary General be focused in particular on finding the first woman to lead the organization. And a P5 country, I won't name them here because I am diplomatic, was insistent on the language of competence being a bracket after that suggestion, that yes, as long as the candidate is competent. We never ask that men have that bracket next to their name, that they are competent for the job. We assume by the application that you've self-assessed your competencies, and that's why you're in that position. So I do push back at that slightly when women ask me, do you think I'm competent enough for this job? And I said, don't ask that question. I promise you your male colleagues who come into this room and ask for the same promotion will not be questioning their competency when they talk to me. And so I think there's a little bit of a mindset shift that needs to happen around that. Yes, know your information inside out, because the knowledge is power. And being an expert on the process and the rules of procedure in the UN context gives you enormous power, but it's different to competency. And I'll stop there.
Absolutely, Your Excellency. These were really inspiring words, and I hope we have a lot of young females listening now, and we will also share an edited version of our session today, because I think it's very important, and Dina believes it's very important that we put this information out there. We have amazing, experienced, knowledgeable leaders here today with us. I've personally learned so much from all of you, but knowing your worth and knowing your value is something that's very important for young females out there. And I love what you said about competency, because we do tend to second doubt ourselves. We have one very quick comment from Her Excellency Ambassador Cardoso on the balance of family. And then I would like to just close with one question from the audience, and then I have our closing remarks. Your Excellency.
Yes, thank you, Mariam. Yes, I wanted to shortly underline this issue of having a family, and actually what you yourself said, Mariam, that you never even thought about going into another direction because there was this issue of family, but you were probably very young back then. And I think it's central. All of the things that have been said that are needed competencies for young diplomats are all right. But I fear that many young girls don't even try. They don't even dare to dream to go there, because they have this bias in their head that was, that's given them from society. I've had numerous interns in my 20 years of experience, young men, young women. None of the men ever mentioned having a family as one of the criteria for choosing their job. All of the young women mentioned that. They say, I want to be a diplomat, but I'm not sure, because if I have a family. As Maria was saying, there are two parents to a child, and we still assume nowadays that it's the woman who is going to carry most of the burden of raising the children. And that's why we think we need to multitask. Well, men need to multitask too. And I think what the mothers and fathers need to be careful that they don't stop their daughters from even dreaming of something because of their gender, because they are women and they might bear children. And so, as Francisca was saying, showing them role models, showing them happy diplomats, married diplomats, single diplomats, diplomats with children, without children, and just showing them, look, it's whatever your later choices in life are about family building, it's possible, so that they don't stop themselves from even trying. Thank you.
you so much for this intervention, because we do want the inclusion of men advancing the agenda of gender parity. So if they do not have a big role at home, supporting their wives, becoming what they're passionate about and taking important roles, then we're really wasting our time. It's absolutely true. I will take one question from the audience, and I would like Her Excellency Ambassador Jocelyn to take this particular question, because it's pertaining to everything that we've been talking about, and luckily about family and about women advancing and so on. And I would like to take your take on that, Your Excellency. So we have a long question from one of our colleagues at UN Women in Abu Dhabi, Ms. Hannah Beswick. And you know, there were many efforts done by the United Nations advancing the role of women over the years. But despite, you know, all the extensive research and data demonstrating that women participation in leadership is key to prosperity and stable societies, and is for everyone's benefit, we're still in the phase of still trying to make things happen. So what do we do next in our efforts towards achieving gender parity, and how do we change mindsets, particularly of those in leadership who globally lean predominantly for male, and make the case when it comes to selecting their leadership cabinet or board members? And how do we convince leaders and legislators to write laws that directly serve to empower women? I think this is a very important question, and I believe you really can add a lot as the Philippines is advancing on women participation, especially with migrant workers and women in office particularly, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Hannah, for the question. Yes, I think it's no longer a matter for debate, you know, the capabilities of women. It's all taken for granted already. I think, yes, in the Philippines, we don't debate much on gender. This is already a given that women should be part of every discussion, every decision making. But I think in order to do that, we have to be very deliberate in the sense that we really have to talk the talk and walk the walk. We cannot just always pay lip service. And one thing I think that's important is this is a message for the young women, not just for the young women, but the people around them. I think this is more for the people around them to make sure that they get the support that they need to get them to develop the passion that they have, because it's important that this is nurtured. I think women are great problem solvers. We're community builders. We know how to make tough decisions. Our decisions are grounded in reality. I think there's just no way why we cannot succeed in leadership roles. But the important thing, I think, is that when you see that in a young woman, that she gets encouraged for her passion. So I think it's more a burden or a challenge for the people around her. That's where I want to address whatever message I have in this situation. So again, thank you for this opportunity to give my comments on that.
Your Excellency, and I think we're a little bit over time. We're 9 minutes over time, and I like to be conscientious of timekeeping. So I would like on behalf of MBC Group, MBC Hope, and really truly personally myself, I have enjoyed tremendously being part of this panel, being a moderator here today with such wonderful, inspirational women leaders. I look up to you. I have learned from you, and we thank you for all the efforts and for your participation, particularly representing us as women. You truly lead and lead with purpose, And we need more and more. We need 1 million of you all over the world. So thank you for the opportunity, Dina, in fact, to be here today and to be part of the UN75 Dialogues as an entity, but also as personally as someone that's really advocating youth empowerment, but women empowerment and women in leadership in general. I would leave the closing remarks to you, but first I would like to do one announcement that we are on all social media. The United Nations in UAE is on YouTube, and they will be sharing a lot of videos about the UN history and today, and also around the dialogue. So we will edit the panel today, and for people who have missed it, they will be able to see an edited version of the panel and learn so much from every single one of you today. So I would like to just announce that the United Nations UAE on YouTube and UN_UAE on Instagram. We would like to see more participation, more engagement on social media, so we can create a bigger network and a bigger community celebrating the UN75, but also advancing the UN SDGs for not just for the UAE, or the region, but globally with multilateral partnerships. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. It's been such a pleasure. Over to you, Dina.
Thank you so much, Mariam, and what a wonderful panel. This exceeded my expectations. Really want to thank everyone for such a rich thing, and I definitely needed to make this longer. But I think it just begs the question of the level of experience and the richness of what we have to offer and what you have to offer. And we'll just have to do more of these, because I think the listeners learn so much from these interventions in this short period of time. I think this is a very good example of a UN75 dialogue. So not only did our speakers, and there's no way I can do justice to summarize what was said today, I think it speaks for itself. But what we saw today, everyone, is what leadership is about. And the leadership comes from the experiences that people have to offer. And here we have a panel that has shown us in just 1 hour's discussion, the richness of their experience in bringing to the work that they do. You can do the same. It's very important to us as the United Nations to ensure, as I said earlier, the engagement of all. And I want to stress here also that as the UN, we see for the future, the engagement of youth. And I hope youth that are listening today feel inspired to know that by believing in yourself and believing in your passion, you can move forward and you can succeed. Your gender, it does not hold you back. Whatever background you come from, or country or ethnicity, etc., it does not hold you back. You can achieve what you want to achieve. And this is what I believe our message is. It's really important to realize that if we want to have a world that is better than what it was before, and we've stressed this now as the United Nations, where this pandemic has brought to our attention the interconnectedness of the planet. We are all in this together. The pandemic showed us there is no such thing as a border. And many and all things that we deal with on this planet do not respect any artificial line drawn on a map. So to working together, we can find ways to improve this planet, improve our communities, and improve our neighborhoods. Believe in yourself, believe in your passion, and move forward. And for all the parents in the world, believe in your children and give them the opportunity. I have to thank my parents for doing that for me, and I'm sure all of the panel know and would nod their head to say that their parents also supported them in achieving the dreams that they sought. So thank you very much. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on social media of MBC as well, and we'll be having more UN75 dialogues. And I can guarantee you, given the discussion we had today, I'll be drawing on these esteemed colleagues to come and join us again in other dialogues. Thank you very much.